For centuries, the idea that the presidents of the United States are somehow linked by a single aristocratic bloodline has fascinated historians, genealogists, and curious citizens alike. What if I told you that many of the presidents share distant ancestry with medieval European monarchs? It sounds like the stuff of conspiracy theory or alternate history, but in fact, this notion is rooted in extensive genealogical research. That does not mean there is a secret monarchy ruling America, but it does reveal surprising patterns in the bloodlines of those who have held the highest office in the land. To begin, let's take one of the most often cited ancestors, Charlemagne, 742 to 814 AD, the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Some genealogy sources claim that more than 30 of the first 42 U.S. presidents are descended from Charlemagne. One spokesman for the British aristocratic reference work, Burke's Peerage, even argued that every presidential election since and including George Washington has been won by the candidate with the most royal genes. On the surface, that suggests that even in a democracy grounded in common people, the bloodlines of Europe may have quietly shaped the presidency. Let's unpack how such claims hold up. First, how feasible is it that many U.S. presidents share royal ancestry ties? The answer lies partially in the mathematics of ancestry. Over some 20 to 30 generations, most people of European descent today have many ancestors in common. If a figure like Charlemagne has thousands of descendants today, as many scholars suggest, then it becomes statistically more probable that prominent historical figures, such as U.S. presidents whose family lines date to early colonial times, share one or more of those ancestors. In other words, these royal bloodline findings may reflect the fact that a few medieval European persons sit very far back in the family tree of a large number of present-day people, rather than a purposeful selection of aristocrats. Second, the evidence. In the case of the George Bush family, for example, genealogy researchers found connections to British royalty, including a claim that Bush was a 13th cousin twice removed of Queen Elizabeth II. That detail is easier to verify than broader claims, and so it gains attention. But when the argument is extended to all U.S. presidents, we must be more cautious. Many of the sources promoting the all presidents tied to one royal ancestor idea rely on expensive genealogical compilations that stretch deep into the past and include numerous assumptions or weak links that may not meet rigorous academic standards. For instance, one paper argued that 19 of the presidents descended from Edward III of England. Genealogy is not a guaranteed science when you reach back to the 12th or 13th centuries. Third, what does it mean? Some interpret these findings as evidence of an aristocratic continuity behind American democracy. Others see a far more mundane explanation. America's founding elite, especially in colonial and early Republican times, were disproportionately of Anglo-Saxon descent and interconnected by marriage. Thus, they naturally had links to European nobility. In addition, the further back you go, the more common ancestors you share with many people. Indeed, one genealogical principle is that at a certain number of generations back, everyone of European descent shares the same ancient ancestor, which means finding distant royal ancestors among presidents is less remarkable than it first appears. Let's examine some specific points of interest. The theory known as the most royal candidate argues that winners of U.S. presidential elections had higher proportions of European royal ancestry than their opponents. That raises questions about merit, democracy, and elite networks, though critics argue that the methodology is selective and retrospective. Once you look only at winners and trace them back to royalty, you will find lines, but you might discount the ones that don't fit. Moreover, many genealogies used to bolster the claim are compiled outside academic peer review and occasionally come from self-published or popular sources. Another factor, the term royal bloodline is itself loose. Being a distant cousin, say 10th or 12th cousin, removed many times of a medieval king, is not the same as carrying a royal legacy in the conventional sense. While these relationships are technically correct, the power and status those ancestors held are not transferred. Still, from a storytelling or symbolic viewpoint, the idea is irresistible. The leader of the free world shares lineage with the rulers of old Europe. So, what's the takeaway for an American audience aged 35 to 85? First, this is a fascinating historical curiosity, not a cigarette wrapper conspiracy. The math of genealogy and migration partly explains it. Second, anyone tracing colonial-era ancestry will likely find connections to prominent figures, but that does not equate to modern power over the presidency. Third, if you believe the claim that all presidents are connected to royalty, you should also ask, which are the exceptions? Some genealogical charts list Martin Van Buren as not connected. Others add even him. The debate continues. Fourth, looking at democracy through this bloodline lens can be instructive. It prompts us to ask whether access to power in the U.S. depended as much on who you were, your family, your marriage alliances, as what your policy or character might be. The idea that every U.S. president belongs to a single bloodline of European royalty is probably too sweeping, but the underlying reality that many presidents share ancient European ancestors seems credible and supported by multiple genealogical sources. What that means politically or symbolically is open for interpretation. Perhaps it reminds us that America, though a republic, emerged from a world of old alliances, migrations, and family networks, and the people who rose to lead the nation were shaped in part by that history. It's a reminder that even in a land of democratic promise, the past matters, and from George Washington to the modern era, ancestry is one of many currents that have quietly flowed through the presidency. And that's something worth remembering when you next glance at the White House.